The day I discovered the truth began like any other Tuesday. My arthritis was acting up, a dull ache in my knuckles that came with the changing seasons and my 63 years of life. I just finished my morning coffee, black, no sugar, the way I'd taken it for the last 4 decades working construction, when I reached across the kitchen counter for what I thought was my phone. Martha, my wife of 38 years, had left for her weekly bridge game with the neighborhood ladies. We had identical phone cases, something I'd teased her about when she bought them last Christmas. His and hers, she'd said with that smile that still made my heart skip after all these years. Isn't that cute, Frank? The notification light was blinking when I picked it up. I didn't realize it was her phone until I pressed my thumb against the fingerprint reader and it didn't unlock. Old habits die hard, so I typed in her birthday, our universal password for everything despite our daughter Caroline's constant warnings about security. The screen unlocked, revealing a string of text messages from Tim, our son-in-law of 5 years. I should have put the phone down immediately. I knew that. But something caught my eye, my name, followed by a dollar sign and a number that made my coffee churn in my stomach. Frank doesn't suspect anything. The old man still thinks we're just looking at investment options for him. $450,000 is a lot to work with. My hands trembled as I scrolled up, reading more messages between my wife and Tim. Each word was like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs. Caroline thinks we should wait until after his birthday next month, Martha had written. Make it seem more natural. The papers are already drawn up, Tim replied. Just need his signature. Trust me, it's better if he doesn't understand all the details. At his age, all that financial jargon would just confuse him. At my age, I nearly laughed at that. I'd built a construction company from the ground up, managed million-dollar projects, and negotiated with the toughest union representatives in Boston. And my son-in-law, an accountant with an MBA who'd never created anything with his hands, thought I'd be confused by financial jargon. I set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode, and stared out the kitchen window at the backyard I'd landscaped myself 10 years ago. The Japanese maple was turning red with the approach of fall. Martha had wanted that tree specifically, said it reminded her of the one in her parents' yard where we'd shared our first kiss. I'd planted it for our 28th anniversary. The betrayal burned in my chest, settling into a cold, hard knot. My wife, my daughter, my son-in-law, they were planning something with my money I'd earned through decades of early mornings, late nights, and broken bones. Money I'd saved so Martha would be taken care of after I was gone, so Caroline would have something to build her life on. I picked up the phone again, reading more messages, piecing together their plan. They were going to convince me to sign over control of my assets to Tim's management firm. From what I could gather, once I signed, they'd have access to my retirement savings, the proceeds from selling my business 3 years ago, and even the house. The front door opened, and I heard Martha's laugh, followed by the sound of her purse hitting the entryway table, the same routine for 38 years. I quickly set her phone back where I'd found it and grabbed mine. "Hey, honey," she called out. "Marge says hello. She's still talking about that barbecue you hosted for the 4th. I watched my wife of nearly 4 decades walk into the kitchen, her silver-streaked hair perfectly styled, wearing the blue dress I'd complimented just last week. She looked exactly the same as she had this morning when she kissed me goodbye, but everything had changed. "How was bridge?" I asked, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. "Oh, the usual. Marge overbit, Helen complained about her hip replacement, and I won $20. She smiled, reaching for her phone. "Did any packages come today? I'm expecting those new gardening shears." "Haven't seen any," I replied, turning to rinse my coffee mug in the sink, unable to look at her directly. "I've got to run to the hardware store. Need anything?" "No, I'm all set." She was already scrolling through her phone, and I wondered if she was checking to see if I'd seen the messages. As I backed my truck out of the driveway, my mind raced. How long had they been planning this? Was this Tim's idea, or had my own daughter initiated it? And Martha, the woman who'd held my hand through my father's funeral, who'd nursed me back to health after I fell from that scaffold in '98, who'd sworn to love me in sickness and in health, how could she betray me like this? I didn't go to the hardware store. Instead, I drove to Lincoln Park and sat on a bench overlooking the pond where Caroline had learned to feed ducks as a toddler. The memory hit me hard, her tiny hand in mine, her delighted squeal when the mallards would waddle toward her. I'd worked 6 days a week back then, sometimes 7, building the business. Those Sunday mornings at the park with Caroline were sacred. Now my little girl was a 40-year-old woman plotting with her husband to take control of my money. Had I spoiled her? Had my long hours away from home damaged her somehow? Or was this just who she'd always been and I'd been too blind to see it? I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew I could trust, my old friend and lawyer, Mike Daniels. We'd been friends since high school before either of us had 2 nickels to rub together. "Frank, what's going on, buddy?" His booming voice brought a small measure of comfort. "Mike, I need to see you, today if possible." "It's important." There must have been something in my voice because he didn't ask questions. "Come by the office at 3, I'll clear my schedule." By the time I walked into Mike's downtown office, I'd formulated a plan. I wouldn't confront them, not yet. I needed to understand exactly what they were planning and gather evidence. Then I'd decide how to proceed. Mike looked concerned when I entered his office, his reading glasses perched on his balding head. "Frank, you look like hell. What's going on?" I told him everything, showing him the photos I'd taken of the text messages before leaving the house. His face darkened as he read them. "Jesus Christ, Frank. I'm so sorry. I need to know exactly what they're planning. Can you help me?" Mike leaned back in his chair, thinking. "If Tim's prepared papers for you to sign, he's probably created some kind of trust or power of attorney that gives them control over your assets. But they'd need your signature, which is why they haven't moved forward yet. What would happen after I sign? Depends on how it's structured. Worst case, they could drain your accounts, sell your assets, even take the house, all legally because you'd have given them permission." The cold knot in my stomach tightened. "I need to know more before I confront them." Mike nodded. "Let me make some calls. Tim's firm, it's Bradshaw and Associates, right?" When I nodded, he continued, "I know someone there. Let me see what I can find out discreetly." Over the next week, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was the same Frank Williams, dependable husband, doting father, retired contractor enjoying his golden years. I smiled through dinner with Martha, discussed the weather, and pretended nothing was wrong. Every time she touched my hand or kissed my cheek, I felt sick. Caroline called midweek, asking if she and Tim could come over for dinner on Sunday. "We have something important to discuss with you and Mom," she said, her voice casual, as if she weren't planning to rob her own father. "Sounds great, sweetheart," I replied, the endearment tasting like ashes in my mouth. "Looking forward to it." Meanwhile, Mike was working his contacts. By Friday, he had uncovered the outline of their plan. Tim had indeed prepared documents creating an irrevocable trust that would give him control over my assets as the trustee. The paperwork was disguised as a standard estate planning package, but buried in the legal jargon were clauses that would effectively transfer control of everything I owned. "It's sophisticated," Mike admitted, showing me the copies he'd obtained. "If you weren't looking for it, you might miss what they're really doing here. And once I sign, they could start moving assets immediately. The way it's structured, you wouldn't even necessarily know it was happening until it was too late." I stared at the papers, at the sticky note marked Frank's signature at the bottom of the page. "What do I do, Mike?" "That depends on what you want, Frank. Do you want to confront them, try to salvage these relationships, or do you want justice?" The question hung in the air between us. Did I want to salvage my relationship with the wife who'd plotted behind my back, with the daughter who was willing to steal from her own father? "I want both," I said finally. "I want them to face consequences, but I need to understand why. I need to hear them admit what they've done." Mike nodded slowly. "Then we need to set a trap." On Sunday evening, I watched from the living room window as Tim's BMW pulled into our driveway. Caroline emerged from the passenger side, her blonde hair, so like her mother's when Martha was younger, catching the evening sunlight. Tim circled around to open her door, ever the gentleman. He was carrying a leather portfolio that undoubtedly contained the documents I was meant to sign. Martha had spent the afternoon cooking Caroline's favorite meal, pot roast with roasted potatoes and homemade rolls. The house smelled of comfort and family, a stark contrast to the knot of betrayal still lodged in my chest. "They're here," I called to Martha, who was putting the finishing touches on the table setting. "Perfect timing," she replied. "Dinner's ready." I opened the front door before they could ring the bell. "There's my girl," I said, embracing Caroline. I could feel her stiffen slightly before returning the hug. Had she always done that, or was I just noticing it now? Tim extended his hand. "Frank, good to see you. How's retirement treating you?" I shook his hand, noting the firmness of his grip, the confidence in his smile. "Can't complain. Come on in, your mother's got dinner ready." Throughout the meal, I watched them. Martha seemed nervous, touching her napkin to her lips more often than necessary, refilling wine glasses that weren't empty. Caroline talked too much about nothing important, her yoga class, a new restaurant they'd tried, a movie they'd seen. Tim kept the conversation flowing, occasionally steering it toward finances. "The market's been crazy lately," he remarked, cutting into his pot roast. "Lots of volatility. Makes me glad we've been moving clients toward more conservative positions." "Is that right?" I asked, taking a sip of water. "How's business at the firm?" "Booming, actually. We've been taking on a lot of new clients, mostly retirement planning, estate management, that sort of thing." He glanced at Caroline. "Which actually is part of why we wanted to have dinner tonight." Caroline set down her fork. "Dad, we've been thinking. You've worked so hard all your life, and now you deserve to relax and enjoy your retirement without worrying about managing your finances." "That's thoughtful of you, sweetheart," I said, meeting her gaze. Was there guilt in her eyes, or was I imagining it? Tim pulled the leather portfolio from beside his chair. "Frank, we've put together some options for you, ways to ensure your assets are protected and working for you while minimizing your tax burden." Martha reached over and squeezed my hand. "It makes sense, Frank. Tim deals with this every day. He knows what he's doing." I nodded slowly, looking at each of their faces in turn, my family, the people I trusted most in the world. "Let's move to the living room," I suggested. "More comfortable for going through paperwork." As we settled in the living room, Tim spread the documents on the coffee table. The same documents Mike had shown me, with the same innocent-looking sticky note marking where I should sign. "It's pretty straightforward," Tim began, his voice slipping into what I assumed was his professional tone. "This creates a trust that will hold all your assets. It provides tax advantages and protection from creditors. Martha would be the primary beneficiary, of course, with Caroline as the secondary beneficiary." "And who controls the trust?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. Tim hesitated for just a moment. "I would serve as the trustee. It makes the most sense, given my expertise. But it's all for your benefit, Frank." I nodded, thumbing through the pages as if considering them carefully. "And once I sign this, what happens next?" "We start transferring your assets into the trust. Your house, investments, bank accounts. It's a bit of paperwork, but we handle all of that for you." "I see." I closed the document and looked up at them. "And when were you planning to tell me about the $450,000 you plan to access once I signed?" The room went silent. Martha's face drained of color. Caroline's eyes widened. Tim's professional demeanor cracked, just for a moment, before he regained his composure. "I'm not sure what you mean, Frank," he said, his voice steady but his eyes darting to Martha. "I think you do, Tim." I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of the text messages. "You see, last Tuesday I accidentally picked up Martha's phone instead of mine. Identical cases, remember, Martha. His and hers, quite a coincidence." Martha's hand flew to her mouth. "Frank," I held up my hand to silence her. "I read your conversations with Tim, all of them, about how the old man wouldn't understand the financial jargon, about how you were waiting until after my birthday to make it seem more natural, about the $450,000 you were planning to work with." Caroline was shaking her head. "Dad, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think," I interrupted, my voice harder than I intended. "I've had the documents reviewed by Mike Daniels. I know exactly what they do. They give Tim complete control over everything I've worked for my entire life." Tim leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "Frank, I understand how this looks, but we were trying to protect you. As we age, managing complex finances becomes more difficult. We've seen clients lose everything because they didn't have proper protections in place." "Clients," I repeated. "Is that what I am to you? A client, not your father-in-law? Not the man who welcomed you into this family, who helped you with the down payment on your first house?" Caroline was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "Daddy, please." "Please what, Caroline? Please don't be upset that my own daughter was planning to steal from me. Please understand that you think I'm too old and stupid to manage my own money." The money that put you through college. The money that paid for your wedding. Martha reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Frank, we love you. We were trying to help. I laughed, a harsh sound I barely recognized. Help yourselves, you mean, to my money. To the life I built. Tim straightened, his jaw tight. This is a misunderstanding. If you just let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I cut him off. I understand perfectly. But here's what you don't understand. I leaned forward, looking each of them in the eye. I built my company from nothing. I negotiated million-dollar contracts. I managed dozens of employees and projects across 3 states. Do you really think I wouldn't recognize a con when I see one, even if it's coming from my own family? The silence that followed was deafening. Martha was pale, her hands trembling in her lap. Caroline couldn't look at me. Only Tim maintained eye contact, his expression a mixture of calculation and concern. What happens now? He asked finally. Now, I said, standing up, you leave my house, all of you, Martha gasped. Frank, you can't mean. I do mean it. I've already spoken with Mike. He's drawing up divorce papers. You'll be served tomorrow. Caroline stood, panicked. Dad, no. You can't divorce Mom over a misunderstanding. It's not just about the money, Caroline. It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about 38 years of marriage ending with betrayal. I turned to Martha. I've arranged for you to stay with your sister until you find a place of your own. Pack what you need tonight. I'll have the rest of your things sent over. Martha was crying now, her composure completely broken. Frank, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. There's nothing to work out, I said, feeling strangely calm despite the storm raging inside me. You made your choice when you decided to conspire behind my back. Now you can live with the consequences. Tim stood, gathering his documents. You're making a mistake, Frank. This approach isn't beneficial for anyone. I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the nervous twitch of a muscle in his jaw. Let me be very clear, Tim. If you ever come near me or my money again, I will not only ruin your reputation in this town, I will make sure the ethics board at your firm knows exactly what you tried to do here. How do you think your partners would feel about an associate who tries to scam his own family? He blanched, backing away slightly. That won't be necessary. We're leaving. Caroline was sobbing now, looking between her mother and me. Dad, please don't do this. We can fix this. I shook my head. Some things can't be fixed, Caroline. Some betrayals cut too deep. They left in a flurry of tears and half-formed apologies. Martha packed a suitcase with mechanical movements, her face blank with shock. I called her sister to explain that Martha would be staying with her for a while. I didn't give details, just said we were having problems and needed space. When the house was finally empty, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the life I'd built. Photos of happier times on the walls, furniture Martha and I had chosen together, the view of the garden we'd tended for decades. The silence was oppressive. I picked up my phone and called Mike. It's done, I said when he answered. They're gone. Are you okay? His concern was evident even through the phone. No, I admitted. But I will be. Do you want me to come over? We could grab a drink, talk it through. I considered it but shook my head though he couldn't see me. Not tonight. I need to process this. But tomorrow I want to start making changes. New accounts they don't have access to. New will, the works. You got it. First thing tomorrow, try to get some sleep, Frank. Sleep seemed impossible as I wandered through the house that night, seeing ghosts of my former life everywhere I looked. In the kitchen where Martha and I had danced on our 30th anniversary. In Caroline's old bedroom, still decorated with her high school achievements. In the master bathroom, where 2 toothbrushes still stood side by side in the holder. I finally dozed off in my recliner, waking at dawn with a stiff neck and a heavy heart. But as the sun rose, casting long shadows across my living room floor, a strange sense of resolve settled over me. This wasn't the end of my story, just the beginning of a new chapter. The next morning, I met with Mike at his office. We spent hours restructuring my finances, creating new accounts, changing passwords, updating my will to remove Martha and dramatically reduce Caroline's inheritance. I designated several charities as my primary beneficiaries, along with a small trust for my niece, my brother's daughter, who had always been kind and genuine. What about the divorce? I asked as we finished the paperwork. Mike looked at me carefully. Are you sure about this, Frank? 40 years is a long time to throw away. She threw it away, I corrected him. Not me, he nodded, accepting my decision. I've drawn up the papers. Standard division of assets acquired during the marriage. She'll get her fair share legally, but nothing more. Good, and I want to sell the house, too many memories. Let's not rush that decision, Mike advised. Give yourself some time to adjust first. As I left his office, my phone rang. It was Caroline. I hesitated before answering. Dad, her voice was small, tentative. Can we talk? Please, part of me wanted to hang up to continue the cold silence, but something made me respond. What is there to say, Caroline? So much, Dad, so much I need to explain. Can I come see you? Alone, no Tim, I promise. I thought about it, weighing my anger against my love for my only child. Fine, meet me at Lincoln Park by the pond, 1 hour. Caroline was already waiting when I arrived, sitting on the bench where I'd taken her to feed ducks as a child. She looked up as I approached, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, so unlike her usual polished appearance. I sat beside her, leaving space between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, both watching the ducks glide across the pond's surface. I used to bring you here every Sunday, I said finally. You loved those ducks. I remember, she said softly. You'd let me throw the bread crumbs, and you'd tell me stories about when you were a boy. The memory hung between us, a reminder of simpler times. I turned to look at her directly. Why, Caroline? Why would you do this to me? She closed her eyes, tears leaking from beneath her lids. It started small. Tim was concerned about your retirement plans, genuinely concerned, I think. He said with the market being so volatile, your savings might not last as long as you needed them to. And you believed him, that I hadn't planned properly? I don't know what I believed, she admitted. He's the financial expert, not me. He said he could help manage your investments better, get better returns. It made sense. And when did it change from helping to stealing? She flinched at the word. It wasn't supposed to be stealing. The trust was real, you would have been the beneficiary, but Tim said, she trailed off, looking ashamed. Said what? That once he had control, he could allocate some of the funds for investments that would benefit all of us. That it was fair because we would be taking care of you as you got older. Taking care of me? I repeated. I'm 63, Caroline. I'm not in a nursing home. I'm not senile. I've been managing my own money successfully for longer than you've been alive. I know, she whispered. I know that now, but Tim was so convincing. He showed me projections, talked about estate taxes, probate costs. And then Mom got involved, and it all snowballed. Your mother, I said, the betrayal still fresh. That's what hurts the most. 38 years of marriage, and she chose to betray me with my own son-in-law. Caroline looked surprised. Mom was against it at first. She only got involved because Tim convinced her it was in your best interest. She was trying to protect you in her own misguided way. I shook my head, unconvinced. I read the messages, Caroline. She was fully on board. By then, yes, Tim can be persuasive. He has a way of making bad ideas sound reasonable. She wiped her eyes. I'm not making excuses. What I did was wrong, inexcusably wrong. I betrayed your trust, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Her sincerity was evident, but the wound was still too raw. Words are easy, Caroline. Trust is harder. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I know. She reached for my hand tentatively, and after a moment's hesitation, I let her take it. I don't expect forgiveness, Dad. I just want a chance to make amends somehow. We sat in silence for a while, watching the ducks, our hands connected, a tenuous bridge over a chasm of broken trust. What about Tim? I asked eventually. Her expression hardened. I've moved out. I'm staying with Jen from work for now. This surprised me. You've left him? How could I stay? He was willing to steal from my father. What kind of man does that make him? She shook her head. I was blind, Dad. So blind. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt a small crack in the wall of anger I'd built. My daughter might have been misguided, manipulated even, but she wasn't beyond redemption. I need time, Caroline. This isn't something I can just get over. I understand. She squeezed my hand. I'll wait, Dad, as long as it takes. As we parted ways, I felt marginally lighter. The betrayal still stung, but the absolute certainty of my family's malice had been shaken. Caroline, at least, seemed genuinely remorseful. But what about Martha? I drove home, mulling over everything Caroline had said. Was it possible Martha had been manipulated too? Or was that just what I wanted to believe after nearly 4 decades together? When I pulled into my driveway, There was an unfamiliar car parked at the curb. As I got out, Elaine, Martha's sister, approached me. "Frank, we need to talk." Elaine had never been my biggest fan. She thought Martha had settled by marrying a contractor instead of the doctor or lawyer their parents had envisioned. But she looked concerned now, not antagonistic. "Martha's a mess," she said without preamble. "She hasn't stopped crying since she arrived at my house. She says she's ruined everything, that she's lost you forever. She betrayed me, Elaine. She and Caroline and Tim were planning to take control of my money." Elaine shook her head. "That's not how she tells it. She says Tim convinced her it was for your protection, that you'd be taken care of, but without the stress of managing everything yourself." "And you believe that?" "I believe she believes it," Elaine replied carefully. "Martha's not perfect, Frank, but she's not a thief. She's loved you faithfully for nearly 40 years. I thought about all the years we'd shared, the struggles of the early days when the business was just starting, the joy when Caroline was born, the quiet companionship of recent years. Could all of that be a lie? "I need proof," I said finally. "Not just words, actions." Elaine nodded. "She wants to see you, to explain in person. Will you at least give her that chance?" Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the wall of anger that was protecting me from the pain underneath. But another part, the part that still loved the woman I'd built a life with, couldn't deny her this. "Tell her to meet me at Marino's tomorrow at noon." It was the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date, so many years ago. Elaine looked relieved. "Thank you, Frank. That's all she's asking, for a chance." As she left, I wondered if I was being a fool, if I was setting myself up for another betrayal. But the alternative, shutting out the possibility of reconciliation, of understanding, seemed worse somehow. The next day, I arrived at Marino's 15 minutes early, securing a quiet table in the back. The restaurant had changed owners several times over the decades, but the red-checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles remained the same. Martha arrived precisely at noon, looking smaller somehow, diminished. Her hair was pulled back simply, her face bare of makeup, her eyes swollen from crying. She hesitated at the entrance until she spotted me, then walked over with uncertain steps. I stood as she approached, old habits, and she seemed surprised by the courtesy. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she sat down. "Elaine said you wanted to talk." "So talk." Martha folded her hands on the table, then unfolded them, fidgeting nervously. "I don't know where to begin. How about the truth, for once?" She flinched but nodded. "I deserve that. The truth is, I made a terrible mistake. I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." "Why?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me for days. "After all these years, why would you do this?" Martha's eyes filled with tears. "It started with genuine concern. You've been so stressed about money since you retired, always checking the accounts, worrying about the market. Tim approached me after Caroline's birthday dinner last month. He said he could help ease your burden, set up a system that would protect our assets and give you peace of mind." "I wasn't stressed about money," I countered. "We have more than enough." "Not for you, for me," she clarified. "He painted this picture of what would happen if something happened to you, how I wouldn't know how to manage everything, how I could lose it all without your guidance. He made me feel helpless, vulnerable." I considered this. Martha had never been interested in our finances. I handled the investments, the bills, the taxes. She managed the household budget but left the bigger picture to me. Had I left her unprepared? "That doesn't explain the text messages about taking $450,000, I said. She looked down, ashamed. "Tim said we should set aside a portion of the assets for specialized investments that would yield higher returns. He said it was completely ethical, that trustees do it all the time. I didn't understand all the details, but he made it sound routine. And you didn't think to discuss this with me first. Your husband of 38 years? He said you would resist because you're set in your ways, that it would be easier to present you with the completed plan so you could see the benefits without getting bogged down in the details." She wiped away a tear. "It sounds so stupid when I say it out loud. I don't know why I believed him." "Because you wanted to," I said flatly, "because it was easier than having an honest conversation with me." She nodded, accepting the criticism. "Yes, I was a coward, and I've lost everything because of it." The waiter approached, asking if we wanted to order. I waved him away, too focused on the conversation to think about food. "What about Caroline?" I asked. Was she part of this from the beginning? Martha shook her head. Tim brought her in later. He told her it was all about protecting you, protecting us. She trusted him implicitly. And you? Did you trust him implicitly too? She met my eyes for the first time. I trusted that he had our best interests at heart because he's family. I never imagined he would. That he could. She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. That he could be planning to steal from us, I finished for her. That's what this was, Martha. Theft, dressed up in legal documents and fancy terms, but theft nonetheless. I see that now, she whispered. Frank, I know I've destroyed your trust. I know I may have destroyed our marriage, but I need you to know that I love you. I have always loved you. What I did was unforgivable, but it came from a place of fear, not malice. I studied her face, searching for signs of deception. But all I saw was grief, regret, and something else, a desperate hope that not all was lost. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, I said honestly. Trust isn't just given back once it's broken. I know. She reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. But I'm asking for a chance to earn it back, day by day, for however long it takes. I didn't take her hand, but I didn't pull away either. What about Tim? Her expression hardened. Caroline told me she's left him. I support her decision completely. What he did, what he convinced us to do, is unforgivable. And if I asked you to choose between supporting Caroline reconciling with Tim or reconciling with me, there's no choice to make, she said without hesitation. It's you, Frank. It's always been you. I sat back, processing everything she'd said. Was it possible she was telling the truth? That she'd been manipulated, misled? Or was this just another act, a desperate attempt to salvage what she could from the wreckage of our marriage? I need time, I said finally. I can't just forgive and forget. I'm not asking you to. She finally reached all the way across the table, her fingers brushing mine. I'm asking for the chance to show you, through actions, not words, that I can be trusted again, that we can rebuild what I've broken. Against my better judgment, I turned my hand over, allowing her fingers to interlace with mine. The familiar touch sent a jolt through me, decades of memory contained in that simple connection. The divorce papers are ready, I said, watching her reaction. Pain flashed across her face, but she nodded in acceptance. If that's what you decide, I'll understand. But I'm not giving up on us, Frank, not without a fight. We left the restaurant separately, Martha returning to her sister's house, me to the empty home we'd shared for decades. I felt confused, torn between the anger that had sustained me and the tiny spark of hope that had been kindled. That night, I called Mike. Hold off on filing those divorce papers, I said when he answered. I need more time to think. Are you sure, Frank? What's changed? I'm not sure of anything anymore, but I owe it to 38 years of marriage to be absolutely certain before I end it. Over the next few weeks, I investigated Tim more thoroughly. What I discovered was disturbing. He had a pattern of helping elderly clients restructure their assets in ways that gave him unusual levels of control. Nothing explicitly illegal, but ethically questionable at best. Several clients had moved significant sums into investment vehicles where Tim earned substantial commissions. I took my findings to the managing partner at his firm, a straight-shooter named Harriet Bell, whom I'd met at several charity functions over the years. She was appropriately horrified. This will be investigated thoroughly, Frank, she assured me. If what you're showing me is accurate, Tim won't just lose his job, he could lose his license. That's all I ask, I said. That and discretion regarding my family's involvement. She nodded understanding. Of course, this stays between us. Caroline had filed for divorce and was rebuilding her life piece by piece. She called me regularly, not pushing for forgiveness, but simply maintaining contact. She'd found a small apartment and was considering going back to school to finish the master's degree she'd abandoned when she married Tim. Martha remained at her sister's, respecting my need for space. She wrote me letters, actual handwritten letters, delivered by mail. They weren't pleas for reconciliation, but rather reflections on our life together, acknowledgments of her failings, and promises to be better. I found myself looking forward to them, these glimpses into her heart and mind. 2 months after the confrontation, I invited them both, Martha and Caroline, to the house for dinner. It wasn't a celebration, but it was a beginning. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I said as we sat at the dining table, the three of us in our familiar places with one chair conspicuously empty. About trust, about family, about forgiveness. They waited, silent, for me to continue. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust either of you again, I said honestly, but I do know that I don't want to live the rest of my life alone, angry, and bitter. That's not who I am. That's not who we are as a family. Martha's eyes filled with tears. Caroline reached across the table and took my hand. What are you saying, Dad? I'm saying I'm willing to try, to rebuild. But there will be conditions. I outlined my terms: complete financial transparency, therapy, both individual and family, no contact with Tim, and patience. Rebuilding trust would take time, and they needed to accept that. Both agreed immediately, without reservation. I've also made changes to my will and financial arrangements, I told them. Most of my estate will go to charity when I die. You'll each receive a modest inheritance, but nothing close to what you would have before. I expected protests, but there were none. That's more than fair, Martha said softly. More than we deserve. Caroline nodded agreement. We betrayed your trust, Dad. We can't expect things to go back to the way they were. Their acceptance was the first real step toward healing. That night, after Caroline left, Martha lingered at the door. I should go back to Elaine's, she said, though her reluctance was evident. I took a deep breath, making a decision I wasn't entirely sure of. You could stay, in the guest room, I added quickly, if you wanted to. Hope bloomed on her face. Are you sure? No, I admitted, but I'm willing to find out. 6 months later, Tim pleaded guilty to several counts of financial misconduct. None of the charges involved our family. I'd kept my promise to protect Martha and Caroline from public scandal, but his career was over. The last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona to work at his uncle's car dealership. Martha had moved back into our bedroom after 3 months in the guest room. Our relationship was different now, more cautious, more deliberate, but in some ways stronger. We talked more openly, addressed issues head-on rather than letting them fester. The weekly therapy sessions had given us tools we'd never had before. Caroline had started her master's program and was thriving. She came for dinner every Sunday, sometimes bringing a friend, sometimes alone. She was dating again, cautiously, a history professor from the university who seemed kind and straightforward. I decided not to sell the house after all. Too many memories were embedded in these walls, not all good, but all part of our story. Instead, Martha and I were renovating, creating a new space that acknowledged our past while making room for our future. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Martha reached for my hand. Are you happy, Frank? She asked, a question that would have seemed simple before, but now carried the weight of everything we'd been through. I considered it seriously. I'm content, I said finally. Getting to happy, you, she smiled, the smile that had captivated me all those decades ago. The same, getting there day by day. We weren't the same people we had been before the betrayal. We never would be. But perhaps these new versions of ourselves, more honest, more vigilant, more appreciative of what we had, could build something just as meaningful. The Japanese maple in the yard had lost its red leaves for the winter, but I knew they would return in the spring. Nature's cycle of death and renewal, season after season. Our family was in such a cycle now, old patterns dying away, new growth taking their place. It wasn't the ending I'd expected for my story. It wasn't an ending at all, really, but a continuation. A new chapter in a book I'd thought was finished. There would be good days and bad, trust earned and tested, wounds that would never fully heal but would become less painful with time. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon, I squeezed Martha's hand gently. Not in forgiveness, that was still a work in progress, but in acknowledgement. We were still here, still together, still trying. And for now, that was enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.